Ever since the Unlimited Love Tour kicked off, one thing I've seen discussed and talked about quite a bit online actually is that John Frusciante's amps that are on stage are in fact dummy amplifiers. The amps that are responsible for his sound are actually hidden behind stage, and those are actually what are being used, not the amps you see on stage. I personally have never bought into this theory, and I'm going to break down for you guys why I never have and why I still don't today. So, as I'm sure you guys are all aware, John Frusciante has 3 amps on stage with him for the Unlimited Love Tour. You have, of course, a vintage Marshall Jubilee, a Marshall Major, as well as a Marshall JMP 2203, like that guy right there behind me. Now, these 3 amps are what he's had on stage the entire tour, and John Frusciante has always used a 3 amp setup, albeit maybe in a bit of a different context, only using 2 for example, and then having one for the Slash rig back in Stadium Arcadium's era and stuff like that. But for this tour, these are the 3 that are on stage. Now, thanks to the show in Detroit, we actually see John using these amps on stage when his rig goes down. When John's rig goes down at the start of Californication, the solution for the time being is to plug his guitar directly into the Marshall Jubilee that's on stage, just to go direct in. And you immediately notice a huge difference in the sound, number one. He's only using 1 amplifier instead of at least 2, possibly all 3. And you see him actually standing in front of the amp, looking at the settings, goes to adjust them a little bit, and then, satisfied with the sound, pretty much uses his volume knob at that point for the solo and for the regular parts of the song. But this confirms that John is in fact using the amps on stage. These amps are live and actually running and hooked up to cabinets on stage that are mic'd. These amps are ready to go. Now yes, John Frusciante does have amps off stage. He has a Marshall Major head as well as a Marshall Silver Jubilee head that are in a rack unit. But to me, these are backup amplifiers for those 2. Worst case scenario, they can fire those 2 up and have them running and feeding the cabs out front, and that is just, God forbid his entire amp rig happens to go down, or even they need to just swap one of them in for if the Major goes down, for example, will they have another Major backstage? Now let me run you guys through the thought process here of those amps at least being dummies, and these amps that are off stage being the ones that are feeding the cabinets for the main sound. Now, if those were the amps that were running, for example, well, when they went to plug in for his entire rig, why wouldn't they just have fed the same line that goes backstage to those amplifiers and just plugged his guitar in that way? It seems to me that that's a way easier solution than, okay, we're going to turn the amps off that are in the rack unit, activate the one that's on stage, and then John's going to use that one for the show. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally. But I understand where the concept is coming from, because Josh Klinghoffer actually did this very thing. If you guys remember in his rig rundown, he had a Marshall Major and a Fender Tone Master for his main 2 amps. Then he actually had a B rig for those 2 amplifiers as well, just underneath them in the same rack off stage. And then on stage, he had a 3rd Marshall Major, and then it was a Fender Showman that was on stage, and they weren't what were feeding the cabinets. They were just on stage. They're real amps, but they weren't what was actually responsible for his sound on a nightly performance. It was the amps that were in the rack unit behind stage, and then Ian could just go in. If the 1 Major went down, well, then he has one right underneath that he can turn on, and boom, Josh is all good and running again.
So we start with the majors. So we've got, this is main and then backup Major. Main and backup Fender Tone Masters, 200 watt, 100 watt. I use these radial boxes. It's a 2-head splitter thing, so if a head goes down, you just straight to the other head on backup. That's kind of handy, same with this guy. So we've got a nice bit of redundancy going on there. As you can see, there's pedals stuffed everywhere.
I was gonna say, take note of this, guys, as you got pedals just kind of lurking.
Yeah, it's got to make the most of any storage you can get your hands on.
And is there, so I'm assuming the top 2
Yeah, sorry, this is main, back up.
Okay.
And then these feed via another loom out to the cabs on stage.
All right, Ian, before we dive into the pedal mania up here on stage, talk us through what we see here.
Okay, so we've got the cabinets which are being fed by the amps off stage. The heads on top, not exactly dummies, but there's quite a lot of stuff going on behind here that just looks a bit rough if you don't have a head sitting on top. So for the sake of my own aesthetic, I decided to put heads up here. But
and they're real, because these are like 80 pounds.
And they're very heavy. Yeah, exactly. I hump them around every day. But the cabinets themselves are actually being fed by the heads off stage.
I also think this theory initially came up because John Frusciante wasn't using a Marshall Jubilee to start off the Unlimited Love era. He was using a Marshall Major as well as the JMP 2203 on stage, and then there was, we know for a fact, a Marshall Major and a Silver Jubilee behind the scenes, behind the stage. Now, a lot of people at that point started immediately theorizing, oh, the 2203 is just out there for a dummy, it's those amps in the rack that are responsible for a sound. Well, the fact that he's stuck with the 2203, I think really validates that amp in a John Frusciante context, and at this point we don't know for sure what he's actually using in terms of amps on a nightly basis. Is he using just 2 of them? Is he using all 3 of them? I've heard rumors that he's experimented with using both majors during performances, so the major on stage and then the major in the rack actually being responsible for parts of his sound at least. Is he changing what amps he's using for different songs or even on a nightly basis? That we don't know. But what we do know is that the amps that are on stage are wired up to the cabinets and are ready to go. So I'm pretty confident at least that these amplifiers are what John Frusciante is using. And if I was a betting man on this, I'd bet that all 3 amplifiers are what he's using for the most part. He might be switching things out. That could be very well possible. But for the most part, on a nightly basis, we're hearing all 3 of those amplifiers going. That's at least my theory as for what is going on. So from that footage from Detroit, seeing John plug directly into one of the amps on stage and using that, we know for 100% certainty in a live context, that just made me think of that whole debate that I saw, especially when the Unlimited Love tour kicked off. Oh yeah, John's not using any of those amps, they're all off stage. Every big act does that. I had comments on different videos of people talking about that. I saw that on Reddit and in different forums. And to me, this all just brought up that debate, and I just wanted to put my voice and my opinion on what's going on. And I think you guys will agree with me based on what we've seen today in this video, that those amps are in fact running, and that's what John is using. Again, it wouldn't make sense. His rig goes down. Okay, John, we've been using the amps that are backstage. There's nothing wrong with those. But we're going to swap to the one that's sitting on stage, and we're going to use that one. It just doesn't make sense. They just give him the lead and go into both of those amps and run his sound as normal. But you can clearly hear there's a huge difference in sound with them swapping just to one amp on stage. They didn't use any of the backups that are in the rack unit. They just went down to one amp and simplified his rig just for that one song in order to get through it before they found a bigger solution for the remainder of the night. There you guys go. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you guys love all this John Frusciante content, if you guys want to hear or have me discuss anything else, please leave a comment down below and let me know. As well, you guys, please hit that subscribe button if you like this content as well. I'm almost at 10,000 subscribers at the time of recording this video, at least. I might have hit 10 by the time this one comes out, but I greatly appreciate all the support you guys have shown me for bringing John Frusciante content to my channel. And as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.